What happens when a royal guest completely derails a live television segment? A routine morning show appearance quickly turns into a full-blown disaster. That's exactly what unfolded in today's story, leaving viewers across America in shock. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of celebrity guests who can't handle even the simplest of interview questions? The Good Morning America studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. Michael Strahan, the beloved host known for his warm demeanor and ability to handle even the trickiest guests with ease, was gearing up for what was supposed to be a straightforward interview. The guest? Meghan Markle, who was scheduled to chat about her recent charitable efforts and upcoming projects. It was all set to be a feel-good segment, a perfect way to brighten viewers' mornings. As the cameras rolled and the familiar Good Morning America theme music faded, Michael flashed his signature smile to the audience. Good morning, America. I'm Michael Strahan, and we've got a very special guest with us today. Please welcome Meghan Markle. Polite, if somewhat tepid, applause followed as Meghan walked onto the set. She settled into the plush interview chair across from Michael, smoothing down her designer dress and offering what appeared to be a rehearsed smile. The lights gleamed off her expensive jewelry, and for a moment everything seemed normal. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Michael began, his voice carrying the same warm, professional tone that had made him a morning TV favorite. I know our viewers are excited to hear about your latest charitable work. You've been involved with several organizations recently. Meghan's posture shifted slightly. A flicker of something crossed her expression. Well, Michael, I appreciate you having me on, though I have to say, I'm a little surprised by how basic that question is, she said, her tone sharp. I would have expected something more substantial from someone in your position. The comment hung in the air for a moment. Michael's media training kicked in, his smile never wavering despite the sudden rudeness. Of course, he said smoothly. Let's dive deeper then. Can you tell us about the specific impact you're hoping to make with your foundation work? Impact? Meghan's tone became noticeably condescending. Michael, I think you're missing the bigger picture here. The work I do isn't just about impact. It's about transformation. It's about changing the entire landscape of how we think about social responsibility, but I suppose that might be difficult for some people to grasp. The camera operators exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the easy, friendly interview they had been prepared for. Michael, however, remained the consummate professional, leaning forward slightly with genuine interest. That's fascinating. Meghan, can you give our viewers some concrete examples of the transformation you're working toward? Meghan's laugh was sharp, almost dismissive. Concrete examples? Michael, you're thinking too small. You're trapped in this old-fashioned media mindset where everything has to be reduced to sound bites and simple explanations. The work I'm doing operates on a much higher level than that. I understand, Michael replied smoothly, though viewers could sense his patience being tested. But our audience includes people from all walks of life who might be inspired to get involved in similar work. Could you help them understand how they might contribute? That's exactly the problem, Meghan snapped, her voice rising slightly. Everyone wants to contribute, but they don't want to do the real work of understanding the complexities involved. They want everything handed to them in neat little packages. That's not how real change happens, Michael. The producer in the control room was frantically signaling to the floor manager, realizing the interview was veering off course. Michael, reading the room perfectly, tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. Let's talk about your recent trip to New York, where you visited several community centers. What was that experience like for you? Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. You know, Michael, I find it interesting that you're focusing on the trip rather than the systemic issues those community centers are trying to address. It's this kind of surface-level journalism that prevents real progress from being made. I'm certainly interested in discussing those systemic issues, Michael responded, maintaining his composure despite the increasingly hostile tone from his guest. What would you say are the most pressing concerns you encountered? The most pressing concern, Meghan said, her voice dripping with condescension, is that people in positions like yours with platforms like this continue to ask the wrong questions. You have millions of viewers, Michael, and you're wasting that opportunity on superficial celebrity chit-chat. The studio audience, which had been politely attentive, started to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some viewers at home were already reaching for their remote controls, unsure whether they were witnessing a train wreck or some kind of performance art. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. I appreciate your perspective, Meghan. Our goal here is always to inform and inspire our viewers. If there are specific issues you'd like to highlight, I'm more than happy to give you that platform. Meghan's tone grew sharper, her words cutting through the air. Michael, this isn't about you giving me anything. This is about you doing your job properly. When was the last time you challenged your guests to think beyond their comfort zones? When was the last time you used this show to tackle real issues instead of just promoting celebrity projects? The control room was in a state of chaos. The producer was frantically considering whether to cut to commercial early, while the director scrambled to find the right camera angles for what was quickly spiraling into a disaster. But Michael, as always, remained composed, handling the situation with the grace and professionalism that had defined his career. We cover a wide range of topics on Good Morning America, he replied calmly. Today, we invited you here to discuss your charitable work because our viewers are interested in learning about causes they might want to support. If you'd prefer to discuss other topics, we can certainly do that. Other topics? Meghan's voice reached a new pitch, her irritation palpable. Michael, everything is connected. You can't separate charitable work from politics, from social justice, from the fundamental inequalities that plague our society. But I suppose that level of thinking might be too complex for morning television. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several crew members exchanged concerned glances, unsure of how Michael would react to such a blatant attack on his intelligence and professionalism. Taking a deep breath, Michael clasped his hands calmly in his lap. Meghan, I think our viewers would benefit from hearing about specific ways they can get involved in causes you care about. Can we focus on actionable steps people can take? Actionable steps? Meghan's laugh was bitter and dismissive. Michael, you're still not getting it. The first actionable step is for people like you to stop dumbing down important conversations. The second step is to stop treating your audience like they're incapable of handling complex ideas. The personal attacks were escalating, growing sharper with every word. Michael's professionalism was being tested in ways few hosts ever face, yet he maintained his composure, understanding that millions of viewers were watching to see how he would handle this increasingly hostile situation. What happened next would go down as one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. Michael, Meghan said, her tone unyielding, I can see you're passionate about these issues, but you need to stop asking me these basic questions. Her voice was dripping with disdain. What inspired me, Michael, was seeing how people in positions of influence consistently fail to use their platforms responsibly, present company included. The studio fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the hum of the equipment. Even the cameramen, seasoned professionals who had seen countless interviews go off the rails, were stunned by the brazen disrespect Meghan was displaying live on air. Michael's smile, which had held steady through the earlier tension, began to fade, replaced by a more serious expression. I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, Meghan. Of course you don't understand, Meghan snapped, her hand waving dismissively. That's exactly the problem. You're sitting there asking me fluffy questions about community center visits, when there are children going hungry, families torn apart by systemic racism, women silenced by patriarchal structures. And your response is to ask me about inspiration? Those are certainly important issues, Michael replied, his patience visibly thinning. If you'd like to discuss any of those topics specifically, we can absolutely do that. But attacking me personally isn't going to help address any of those problems. Meghan's eyes flashed, a hint of anger behind them. Attacking you, Michael? I'm trying to educate you. There's a difference, though. I realize that distinction might be lost on someone who spent their career asking celebrities about their workout routines and favorite recipes. The jab about his career landed, and it stung. Michael had worked incredibly hard to establish himself as a serious journalist, transitioning from sports with dedication and professionalism. The crew could see his jaw clench, though his voice remained measured. I've been fortunate to interview world leaders, Nobel Prize winners, and people making real differences in their communities, he said quietly, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. I take my responsibility to our viewers very seriously. Do you? Meghan mocked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you take your paycheck seriously. There's a difference between responsibility and just showing up to collect a salary. Meanwhile, the control room was in complete disarray. The producer was desperately debating whether to cut to commercial, while network executives, now aware of the disaster unfolding, were frantically making urgent phone calls. Michael, however, stood firm. "Meghan, I invited you here to share your message, and I've given you every opportunity to do that. But I won't sit here and let you insult me, our show, or our viewers." "Your viewers," Meghan scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "They're part of the problem. Sitting at home, sipping coffee, feeling good for watching a segment about charity but doing nothing to create real change." The audience visibly stiffened, a mix of confusion and offense on their faces. Michael's instincts flared, protective of the people who tuned in every day. "I think you're underestimating them, Meghan," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Our viewers are teachers, parents, small business owners, people working hard to make a difference every day." "Contribute? Showing up to work and paying taxes isn't contribution, Michael," Meghan retorted, her voice rising. "Real contribution requires sacrifice, challenging the status quo. But I suppose that's too much to ask from morning television." The insults were no longer just directed at him. They were aimed at the millions of viewers watching at home. Social media exploded in outrage as people reacted to what they were seeing. Michael leaned in, his tone sharp. "You need to be careful how you talk about the people watching this show." "Careful?" Meghan shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's the problem. Everyone's so worried about being careful, not offending anyone, while real issues go unaddressed. What hard questions would you like me to ask?" Michael countered, his voice tinged with frustration. "How about this?" Meghan sneered, leaning back with a satisfied smirk. "When was the last time you challenged your viewers' preconceptions? Made them uncomfortable with truths they didn't want to hear? That was the breaking point." The subtle jabs at his professional integrity hit hard. Michael, who had spent years building a reputation for hard-hitting interviews and respectful discourse, could only take so much. "I've covered natural disasters, interviewed world leaders, and given a platform to people making real change," he said, his voice now steady but unwavering. "I don't need to insult my guests or disrespect my audience to prove my commitment to journalism." Meghan's response was sharp. "From where I sit, it looks like you need to do something to prove you're more than just a pretty face reading from a teleprompter." The insult struck deep, but Michael held his ground. "I've interviewed Nobel laureates, people making a real difference," he said. "And I've always treated them, and our audience, with respect. You, on the other hand, seem more interested in tearing people down than building anything up." The tension in the studio reached a boiling point. The crew, once uncomfortable, now watched with rapt attention as Michael stood his ground. Meghan's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she snapped, standing up. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Michael replied, his voice firm. "You're someone who thinks your title gives you the right to treat people poorly. To act like being rude somehow makes you important. You've completely forgotten that respect is a two-way street." Meghan ripped off her microphone, ready to storm off. "This is ridiculous. I came here to talk about important issues, and instead, I'm being lectured." "Real journalism," Michael said, rising to face her, "involves listening, treating people with respect, and having hard conversations without resorting to personal attacks." Meghan scoffed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Michael shot back. "I know what it's like to have difficult conversations while treating everyone with dignity. You've shown none of that today." Her composure shattered. "You don't get it. Your viewers are all small-minded, pretending that watching morning TV makes them informed." Michael's voice cut through her rant. "Stop. You don't get to come on this show and insult teachers, healthcare workers, parents, and the people who make this country work. Your elitist attitude is exactly what's wrong with the world." Meghan's face was a mix of disbelief and anger. "I never said—" "Yes, you did," Michael interrupted. "You've spent the last 20 minutes telling me and everyone watching that we're not smart enough, not worthy enough to engage with your ideas. But here's the thing. Treating people badly doesn't make you superior. It just makes you someone people don't want to be around." Meghan, rattled now, tried to regain control. "I am a member of the royal family." "And I'm someone doing my job," Michael responded calmly. "Your title doesn't give you the right to be cruel to others. It doesn't excuse your behavior, and it certainly doesn't impress me or anyone else in this studio." "I demand an apology," Meghan shouted. Michael's response was swift and final. "The only apology here is from you. You owe an apology to our viewers, to our crew, and to everyone who works hard to make a real difference." Meghan's expression twisted as she processed his words. Her facade cracking. I'm leaving, she declared, pulling off her microphone and dropping it on the chair. That's probably for the best, Michael replied. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards appeared, ready to escort her from the set as Michael remained calm, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The 2 security guards weren't imposing or dramatic, just calm, professional men doing their job. But their presence made it clear. Meghan's time on Good Morning America was officially over. This isn't over, she shot at Michael, pointing a finger as she was escorted off the set. It is, he replied quietly, his gaze following her as she was led out of the studio, likely out of the building entirely. As the door closed behind her, Michael straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and turned back toward the cameras. His voice, when he spoke again, was the same warm, steady tone that had made him a trusted presence for millions of viewers. Well, folks, that certainly wasn't what we had planned for this morning, he said with a slight smile, though there was a hint of strain lingering from the tense half hour. But we'll be back right after this break with a cooking segment that I promise will be much more pleasant for everyone involved. The cameras cut away, the lights dimmed for the commercial break, and the crew erupted into spontaneous applause. Michael hadn't just defended his own integrity. He'd stood up for every hard-working viewer who had been insulted by his guest's arrogance. The moment quickly dominated social media, and for weeks the internet buzzed with praise for how Michael had handled the situation. His ability to stay composed and dignified while holding his ground would be remembered as a masterclass in maintaining professionalism under pressure. And so, that was it. The explosive, shocking moment that would go down in morning television history. What do you think? Did Michael handle it the right way, or should he have cut the interview short sooner? Let me know in the comments below.